Greeting, Fright fans, and welcome back to Tormented Tales, your new favorite channel for the truly terrifying and the terrifyingly true. Tonight's true tales submitted by our viewers concern the simple act of driving, the twist being that these particular journeys were taken in the depths of the night. Sometimes night driving can be fun. There's less traffic, less noise, and you can just enjoy the ride. Sometimes, though, things are not quite that easy. Being alone on the road means you're exposed, and the things that travel alongside you sometimes want to say hello. That is precisely what happened in our first story, submitted by Mark from Nebraska. I'll admit that upon first hearing Mark's story, I secretly hoped that the police would one day release the footage. Having thought more about it since, though, I am now not so sure. Unwanted company. It's been 3 months since I submitted the dashcam footage to the cops. 3 months of calling them every few days to ask what's being done. 3 months of being fobbed off and told that inquiries are ongoing, that they'll get back to me as soon as there are any new developments in the case or new information comes to light. That's a long time for a police department to sit on a piece of information, especially when that information could be important to protecting people. 3 months of putting me off, keeping me at arm's length, and doing absolutely nothing with the footage except trying to bury it and hope that it'll go away quietly and forget about it. But I won't. 7 days ago, I gave them an ultimatum. Either you release the footage or do something with it, or I'm taking my story to the media. They acknowledged my call, but there's been no actual action. I don't make idle threats, so I called up the TV companies, the newspapers, and even the radio. I got a few small bits of coverage which you can find online if you look closely enough, but none of them really took me seriously. The stories always went out as local man claims to have seen, or mystery of the, something like that. It isn't a mystery, and it isn't just a claim. I saw what I saw. Not only that, but I have proof, or at least I did. Now what I have is an incident report sheet and a reference number for the evidence I submitted. As I said, the police have had the footage for 3 months. The actual incident took place closer to 4 months ago, because for a few weeks I just sat on it. I was worried that if I took it to the authorities, they'd confiscate it, pretend it never happened, or worse still, threaten me and tell me to keep my mouth shut. The second part hasn't happened yet. As for the first, well, we're at 3 months and counting, so we'll see. I was driving down highway. Well, I guess I'd better not be too specific just in case. But trust me, it's a busy one, and I'll include the stay time from in my submission. It's up to you guys if you want to read that part out or not. My advice would just be to keep an eye out if you're driving at night on any of those major highways. It was around 3 in the morning. I'd come off one of the interstates, joined the highway, and had come to one of those points where the streetlights are few and far between. If you've driven at night in that part of the world, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing but prairie for miles on either side of the road, so your headlights are the main source of light. Either side of the road, there's nothing but black. Usually I quite like driving along these roads at night. Some people would call it lonely and isolated, but to me, if you're the only car and the only real source of light other than the stars for miles around, it feels kinda epic. Like you're traveling into space or exploring or something. Anyway, I was speeding along and making good time when my headlights picked up a shape somewhere in the distance. Something at the side of the road that in the glare of lights and against the darkness looked almost the color of milk. At first sight, I figured it must be a coyote or something, but it was far too big for that. Getting closer, I guessed maybe a deer, but here's the thing. Its limbs were wrong. Like its spine seemed to be the wrong way around. Its legs facing down, but looking more like the stomach was facing the sky. If you think of a kid doing a crab walk or a bridge pose or whatever they call it, but with their head sticking up, that's kind of what it was like. At this point, I was already wondering what the hell it was supposed to be, and since there was nothing around, I slowed a little bit to get a better look. For a second, I thought maybe it was an animal that had been hit by a car, but that had somehow managed to get back up, even after being mangled under the wheels. As I got close, though, it was the goddamnest thing I ever saw, because even though the legs were jutting down as straight and angled as a coffee table, the head, placed on top, wasn't no deer. It was a person. A girl, most likely, with long black hair falling over the rest of the shape. I swear, I almost swerved off the road. I slowed down even more as I came up alongside, and that was a mistake. It started moving. It kind of turned or rolled in some sort of way, the bones and muscles slipping and moving under the skin without the skin ever having to change position, like someone trying to adjust a sweater over their head that they put on back to front. Then it started running, up and alongside the car, speeding along and gaining, all the while the legs and back changing and adjusting as if the damn thing was made of Play-Doh or plasticine or something. I could see it in the rear view, then up alongside. I put my foot down, speeding along at 50, 60, 70, and still the thing was next to me, pelting along at this crazy, impossible speed. Its mouth, a person's mouth, but way too big to be normal, was hanging open, the jaw lolling and swinging from side to side as it ran, as if the top and bottom jaws weren't connected. Finally, when I hit 80, the thing started to lag behind. I'll tell you, I put that pedal to the metal and was out of there at close to 100. Later I look back. I have dashcam footage up front and footage from behind. Both sets showed this thing, changing shape, molding and twisting from one form to another as it ran, sometimes mid-step. One long leg like a giraffe's would get flung back, but it looked like a human foot by the time you saw it again. Watching the thing back was terrifying, so I took it to the police, hoping that they would put out an alert, warn people about this thing, or launch an investigation into what the hell it might be and where it could have come from. That was 3 months ago. The cops have my footage and, no, I'm just some crazy person on the internet telling tall tales. But I'm telling you, I saw what I saw, and they have the proof. 3 months and counting, hoping the whole world will get to see it soon. I hope so, but somehow, I doubt it. So what do you think? What reason do you think the authorities would have to sit on that kind of story? Pressure from above? A decision not to panic people about the idea of some strange creature stalking the prairies? And what in hell or earth do you think it could be? If you have suggestions, or have experienced anything similar, let us know in the comments below. Our next story comes from Anton, who is from Georgia, but whose tale is set in Massachusetts, the state where we find Salem, and of course, the horrors that occurred in that place a few hundred years ago. The Tree at the Crossroads. The tree stands at a crossroads. The locals, I found out later, called it the Turncleft tree, though what in the hell a turncleft is supposed to be, I have no idea. In fact, there's a whole lot about that night that I still don't get. I can honestly say that prior to the night I drove past the tree, I'd never heard of it, never heard of the incident the locals talked about, and never thought about the Salem witch trials or whatever they call them. I was just out for a drive trying to get from A to B. I'll tell you one thing though, if I ever have to go between those 2 points again, I'll take a very different route. I've been driving for one of the big next-day delivery postal services for almost 8 solid years now. It's kind of lonely work in the sense that you have to be on the road a lot. You don't really know where you're going to end up at the end of a delivery, and an awful lot of the deliveries involve long hours of night driving on virtually deserted roads. Still, having said all that, I don't have a wife or girlfriend waiting for me at home. I see my family and friends on the weekends, and driving at night has never really bothered me, especially if it's the more remote areas. All I do is bang on some tunes, turn the volume up, and hit the accelerator. There are worse jobs, believe me. Every now and then, though, you'll hear a story from one of the other drivers about some crazy stuff they've seen when they're out there driving. If you've got that many people driving that many miles at night, eventually you're going to come back with some creepy incidents. People who think they've seen things. People whose imaginations have gotten a bit too active in the dark. And people who are just good at spinning yarns and telling tall tales to make other people get the frighteners of them. I've heard a lot of those stories, but nothing like this. Like I said, the tree was at the crossroads. Now, some people I've spoken to have said that there's some significance to this, that witches are supposed to meet each other or meet the devil at crossroads, or that witches are supposed to be buried at crossroads so they don't get buried in the churchyard with everyone else, or whatever. Not sure of the details, but somewhere along the line, witches and crossroads go together. Well, maybe. But like I said, before that night I never thought about stuff like that, and I certainly didn't go diving into all the old history and folklore and stuff. I only got in any way interested when I came across the bodies. Driving up to the crossroads and finally slowing down after nearly an hour of pelting along, I came to this turn-cleft tree, or whatever they call it. A huge pale thing with low hanging branches that must have been there for hundreds of years. It wasn't the tree that struck me though, it was what was hanging in it. There were bodies, maybe 10 or 15 of them, all wearing these long, white gowns. They'd been hung, execution style, and were just left there, hanging. Some of them turning a little bit in the breeze. Honestly, you will have seen people hanging on TV, but it's not the same as actually seeing them. Their faces were blue, and their tongues, all hanging out, had turned completely black. These folks didn't drop and have their necks broken, they were strangulated. I got out of the van, looked at them for about a minute, and dived straight back behind the wheel. Now, some would say I should have cut them down or tried to help or check, but trust me, not one of those folks was alive. Not only that, but judging by the smell and that some of them had insects crawling all over their faces, they had been there and good and dead for a while. Switching route, I sped into town and straight to the nearest police station. When I told the officers what I'd seen, they smiled and asked if I was joking. That, they said, is the tree on the turncleft. That was the hanging tree in these parts for near 100 years. According to the officers, over 15 people, women and men, were hanged on that tree on accusations of witchcraft. But that obviously was hundreds of years ago. They came out with me, back up the road to the tree, and smiled at each other when they got there to find no such thing. Just a big old tree, undisturbed, and standing there just as always did. I couldn't believe it. I begged them to investigate, telling them over and over that I saw what I saw. In the months since, my friends have suggested that maybe it was some kind of prank. Punk kids with harnesses posing as witches, or mannequins strung up in the trees. When I hear that, I have to laugh. They weren't any mannequins or kids in fancy dress. They were corpses. People, once alive, but now dead. Hung by the neck and swinging in that tree like some kind of creepy-ass mobile or art installation. The cops knew it too. They told me there was nothing to see and nothing to report. They said they wouldn't be filing anything, and that the best thing for me would be to forget about it and be on my way. What they also said, though, was that it wasn't the first. Around once every few months, someone comes into town reporting almost the exact same thing. Sometimes it's one woman, sometimes it's a bunch of people, always in that same tree, always hanging. Like I said before, nowadays, I take a different route. Weird, huh? Could these be the spirits of witches come back to seek revenge? Or are they the souls of normal, innocent folks, punished for being a witch when no such thing actually exists? Who knows? But according to Anton's account, he won't be the last to see them. If you enjoyed these tormented tales, then be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our updates. And if you have had a few horrific encounters of your own, don't forget you can submit your tales to the address in the description. Until next time, Fright fans, sweet dreams and delicious nightmares.